And thank you for coming. My name is Tara Eberhart. I am a guest lecturer with the GW Paralegal Studies program. I teach the litigation course for both the certificate program and the master's program. By day, I'm the senior firm-wide paralegal manager at McKenna, Long, and Aldridge. So I have a program of approximately 100 paralegals spread out over 16 offices, 13 domestic and 3 international. So that's sort of my background. The format that we're going to follow tonight is going to be extremely informal. The idea is that this is your event and your opportunity to talk about what you would like to talk about and ask those burning questions. So we're going to start off by introducing the members of our panel and asking them 1 or 2 intro questions, and then we're hoping that you will jump in with those questions that you sort of came and jotted down or thought about before we got here tonight. So I'm going to actually start at the opposite end with Maria Bright, and ask you to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Maria Bright, and I work for the Armed Services Board of Contract Appeals, which is part of the federal sector. And my background is I served in the military for 6 years, and then after that I went ahead and decided to continue my career in the federal sector.
Great, thank you, Maria. And next to Maria we have Jazzy Spieler.
Hi, my name is Jazzy Spieler. I work as a senior biotech IP, intellectual property, patent paralegal at Sterne, Kessler, Goldstein, and Fox. My background is in chemistry. I previously worked at the patent office as a patent examiner for a short period of time, went to grad school, and went back to the patent field shortly thereafter.
Great. And next to Jazzy we have Kate Crabtree.
Hi. I am Kate Crabtree, and I currently work at Exxon Mobil Corporation in their downstream intellectual property law department, and I basically take the lead on our contracts for that group, and I've been a paralegal for 22 years. After serving in the military for 4 years, I went to a community college and got a paralegal studies degree. Went from there to get my bachelor's degree in history and jurisprudence, and started working at law firms in DC, and really enjoyed working as a paralegal, and thought a little less about the lawyers, I mean just their lifestyle and what they were giving up to be lawyers. And I really love being a paralegal, so I continued doing that. I'm currently in the master's program here as a distance learner from Fairfax, and I am also studying for the PACE examination right now. So.
Great, thank you, Kate. And last but not least, Pascal Goddard.
Hi everyone, I'm Pascal, and I am an alumni of the Paralegal Studies program here at GW. Very proud, I might say. I am currently a senior litigation paralegal at Hollingsworth, LLP. It's a product liability defense firm and a toxic tort. And I must say, trial litigation is very exciting, so beware. I started off, I guess, I call it a court runner, straight out of high school at a law firm my mom worked at. I was actually in the law program at my high school, so being in the legal field was the only thing I desired. My goal was to become an attorney, but I have a 16-year-old, and that tells the story well. So I've always been a paralegal, and my goal when I moved to DC from New York was to become a career paralegal, and GW afforded that, and I'm here on the panel today to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Well, maybe one of the ways we can get started is paralegal profession. One of the things that I really love about it is it's very heterogeneous. There's lots of reasons why people become paralegals or learn about the paralegal profession. So, Jazzy, how did you sort of get interested in becoming a paralegal, or what was the impetus for you to make that your career?
Well, that's a good question, because my background, I have 2 degrees in chemistry, and it's not particularly common among paralegals, but while I was an undergrad, one of my professors used to be an expert for patent trial cases, and it really turned me on to intellectual property at that point in time. And I went to the patent office from undergrad, and I worked there for a short period of time, but I really wanted to try my hand at private sector to see what that was like, and I really enjoy the customer service aspect of what a paralegal does, and I think that using my technical background in addition to my desire to work with people, provide a service, I think it was a really good combination of the two, and that's how I ended up where I am now.
Maria, what about you? You talked a little bit about your military background, but how did you become a paralegal?
I started out as a legal technician, and I was assigned to the tort claims section at the Walter Reed Medical Army facility out in DC here, that I believe now is in Bethesda. And as a legal technician, I was blessed to be assigned to a wonderful attorney and a paralegal specialist that just loved their work and was willing to share and challenge me and allow me to experience what it is to be a paralegal and to think in the legal aspects of how situations occur when it comes to med mal or personal injury, property damage and such. And the part that really grabbed my attention was the opportunity to think on your feet. Litigation, I would have to say, is the most exciting part of the legal field for me. You are constantly engaged with the client, and you're constantly doing research. You have to stay on your toes when it comes to changes in statutes and what you're going to present to support your analysis. And as a legal technician, though I wasn't at the time a paralegal specialist, I was given that opportunity to sit with the attorney and interview doctors, patients, and take in notes as far as what took place, why it occurred, and to think about how does this apply to us? Are we liable, or was the individual responsible for their own action? And with that, knowing the legal field was the right field for me, I knew I had to obtain the necessary education to further myself, because experience alone with what they were teaching me limits you to what they showed you. And that's when I started researching paralegal fields and educations and services that provide you that type of education, and that's when I ran into GW's program. It not only covered one area, it covered 3 different areas, and it also provided the requirements that I would need to be able to write well, strong, and know how to do the research so I can support my argument. And when I provide it to the attorney I'm assigned to, she can see where I'm coming from and why I firmly believe that this case relates to the situation at hand. And then from there, I just went forward and fell in love with the profession. And though I'm not in tort now, I'm in contracts, I would have to say it doesn't really matter what area and field that you go into in the legal field. The foundation of a paralegal and what you do as a paralegal by itself is a rewarding profession, and you'll love every aspect of it. That's why I'm in the paralegal field.
Great, thank you. Kate, what about you?
I guess I'm in it to just support. I mean, I love the support, and I love working with such a diversified group of people. Just when I started out, I was doing real estate settlements, and that's a fairly, once you learn it, it's kind of the same thing every time, only different for each specific case and for each specific set of people and how high strung they're going to be about their largest purchase of their life to date. And so I kind of enjoyed the stress aspect of it, that, I mean, you're really, like, people are really counting on you and really counting on you to you know, stay calm and get through a tough time for people. But also, I love how when you're in that environment and your regular job is putting together settlement statements and maybe doing a sale here or there, you just ultimately end up doing so many different things, and just depending on the level of trust you gain with your attorneys, you end up doing almost anything. And so here I was I'd be setting up corporations yeah, there was just so many different things they could just throw at me to do, and I enjoyed those challenges because everything you kind of soup to nuts, you really learn how to do things. You know, you get guided by your lawyers, which I always appreciate because everybody has a different approach to things, and so you really gain, especially the more lawyers you have, I think the more the more variety or more ways you can approach different situations. Yeah, and that's kind of carried me through just where, yeah, you do so many different things and people trust you to do them, and yeah, the more you do, the more they're going to give you, and so the more they trust you, and the more yeah, it's amazing how that just perpetuates. But
Yeah,
why do I do this to myself?
yeah, it's paralegals. Sometimes we have the label of being gluttons for punishment, right?
Yeah,
You know,
it's wonderful.
the superhero complex sometimes. So, Pascal, you talked a little bit in your opening about why you became a paralegal. So maybe you can answer. We want to make sure that we show a balanced view, and with any career or progression, it's not always flowers and rainbows and unicorns. And what do you think is one of the most challenging things about being a paralegal?
Oh, for me, it has to be when your attorney asks you to find a specific case, or, you know, it's like being put on the spot to get something together quickly, especially being at trial. There's no room for mistakes. It's nerve-wracking. Like, literally, the first time I ever went to trial, I emailed Tara and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like shaking. I didn't even leave DC yet, and I was shaking. Get there, and it's no sleep. I had 20-hour days, and it was just really a pressure to make sure that I had all the exhibits right, that I tagged it the right way, that I spelt the plaintiff or the defendant's name correctly. Like, it could be the little things, but the pressure of knowing the attorney's depending on you to provide him with what he or she's looking for, it's totally nerve-wracking. And at the end of the day, you're losing, your steam is coming down. And I remember being at trial this past February. I got a call from the courtroom. The attorney's like, I need you to bring over 20 copies of, I'm exaggerating, but you know, a certain amount of copies. And I'm like, I gave this thing last night. Like, I'm shaking, like, what did I do wrong? He just wanted black and white copies just in case the judge didn't want colored copies. And I'm like freaking out. So it's just knowing that the expectation they have of you, you have to be on your toes. So, I mean, it just depends on whether or not you know what you're doing, you understand what they ask of you, and how you're going to carry it out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd like to open it up. We certainly have lots of questions that we can ask the panel, but wanted to make sure that we included our audience in our discussion. So is there anyone who would like to sort of kick off with a question that you're interested in addressing to the panel in general, or someone in particular? Yes?
You know, I'm here getting the graduate certificate program, and I have no experience. So I have the education but no experience. So I'm seeing all these ads that are looking for a legal administrative assistant or, you know, a legal secretary, and I'm wondering if that's the way to start, or if I should just hold out, you know, for an entry-level or junior paralegal position. If you can, I know you started as a court runner, and, you know, if you just talk about how to start.
Well, I think personally that is a great place to start, especially if you don't have the experience. But I think for most employers, if they see that you have the experience, they might just throw you into the lion's den. But starting off as a legal secretary, I think will get your foot into the door. You learn the ropes of that firm. You learn the attorneys, know what they want. And it kind of gives you that comfort level that you can build and see yourself grow in that firm. So if you're not comfortable going in as a paralegal, a legal secretary is a great way to start. I sort of think the two sort of go hand in hand sometimes, depending on the firm that you're in. If it's a wide firm, then you learn a lot. And I mean, I started off as well as a legal secretary outside of being a runner. And I learned so much to the point where I just knew I was going to be a career paralegal. If I wanted to track back, I honestly, when I moved to DC, I tried applying as legal secretary, and I'm like, get out of here. I see your history. No, you're too experienced. So it's getting your foot in the door. That should be good.
Did anyone else on the panel want to address the question about starting maybe in a different titled position and then moving within an organization into a paralegal position?
I can address that in sort of a different light because I think I can speak from the perspective that I have experienced at the firm that I work at now, at Sterne Kessler, and I think it really depends on how the firm will define that role. So I don't think that going in as a legal secretary or even interviewing and asking the firm exactly how that role is defined to help you better understand what tasks you'll be responsible for and how they would compare to a paralegal. Because a lot of times the roles have a lot of overlap, and firms, like I said, will define that according to their structure. So I don't think in any way, in my perspective, that it can be necessarily a hindrance starting out. And some firms even, the experience level that they're looking for a legal assistant might supersede that of a paralegal at times. Just depends on how it goes. So, that's good.
Yeah. If I could just put my manager hat on for a minute and address your question, because I do a lot of hiring, and I get this question a lot. I do think it really depends on the organization. If you're applying into a really large global AM 100 firm, we have normally those types of firms have very specific policies on transitioning within the organization. So for instance, at my organization, if you get hired in a titled position other than paralegal, I can't touch you for a year. Okay, so I can't utilize you, I can't train you, I can't talk to you about a paralegal position because you were hired into another department. So after a year, and some people express interest before that unofficially, then if we had an opening, you would be potentially eligible to apply internally. But you do have to be really careful because sometimes transitioning across roles within organizations is not encouraged. There are some firms here in DC that specifically do not do that. The paralegal managers will not pull people out of other departments. They prefer to recruit their own folks versus to have other managers recruit and then to look internally. So it really does depend. And you can get a real sense of a particular firm or organization by talking to the folks that are internal, or by coming to things like this and asking about the specific law firm. Corporations, I think, tend to be a little bit different. And Kate, maybe you could talk about, from a corporate standpoint going in.
We actually have support of administrative assistants in our law departments, and so they don't necessarily have the same legal skills as the legal secretaries I've come across in law firms. But what I love about, in our case, we end up, if our admin is out, we kind of have to cover a little bit to a certain extent. I mean, there's also other admins we can go to. But when you have a relationship with your admin, you know exactly what you've been giving them and what they've been taking off of you. And so what I find, I think one thing that would be really useful is just knowing that, knowing what the legal secretary does, so you know how best to use them, how you can help them help you. And right now I have the greatest administrative assistant in the world, who's now in paralegal school. But he's just fantastic, and but he's really let me know what he will do to help me and lighten my load, and so I feel like I think going in as a legal secretary would be useful to a certain extent, but if there are other jobs of paralegal, junior paralegal positions open, I would probably go there first, just because there's a lot ahead. There's a big road ahead, so
yeah, and
lots to do.
And most job openings, even if they are, we have 12 different titles within my program. So if you just search for paralegal, we've coded all of our job postings. So if you search for paralegal, every one of the other titled positions will come up for you. And a lot of firms do that with keyword searches. So if you don't feel like you have a really good handle on all of the titles that are used, don't panic. Those of us that put together job descriptions or postings, we know that you tend to search for paralegal or legal assistant, and we'll embed that as a search term. So you'll hit our other postings or other titled positions that we think are similar. So another question. Yes?
Not so much a question, but just to touch on what you asked about. I was a paralegal with Jazzy at Sterne, Kessler, and I'm now on the other side in legal staffing. So I talked to a lot of people in a similar role as Tara, as far as managers go and that type of thing. And I had a meeting today where a manager told me that as long as someone can show that they're a hard worker, like he has seen resumes that a person has only been in the restaurant industry, but he had experience in the restaurant industry, so you never know who you're actually interviewing with or what type of experience the person has that's looking at your resume. So you can sometimes connect with them on a different level than just with your legal experience. And for him, it was the restaurant industry that showed him that you're a hard worker, you can stand the hours and that type of thing. So don't be discouraged by not having that specific type of experience. Sometimes that could matter as well. So, yeah.
That's a good point. So there's a lot of transferable skills. And even though you don't have specific paralegal education experience, if you can connect with the skill set and tailor your resume to highlight those skills, then maybe you can make that connection even though you don't have specific experience. So I think is the point. All right, other questions? All right, we'll let you get warmed up. We'll go back to some of our other questions. Your first job as a paralegal, if you can sort of harken back, what do you wish someone had told you before you took that first position, either part of your job search or when you were evaluating and deciding or talking to somebody about taking your first position? And looking back, what did you sort of learn about that process? Maria, maybe we can start with you. When you came out of military and actually had to go into civilian world.
Well, like I had stated earlier, my experience was very positive. They were more interested in the fact that I was eager to learn, and at least in the federal government, that's all I can speak for, not necessarily the private, that you have that energy and the willingness to want to learn. So going in and seeing what a paralegal does, and I was allowed the opportunity, knowing and having the knowledge of what a paralegal does, especially with legal research, is the most important thing, I believe, when you step foot in a paralegal position. Because anybody can file, anyone can make copies, but what a paralegal can do is do the legal research and analysis and serve as the right-hand man to that attorney or that judge. And going in as a paralegal for the first time, knowing that you have the capability of doing the legal research, not necessarily having the answer at hand, but knowing where to find it, how to find it, and maximizing your resources without exhausting your resources to the point you're costing the agency a lot of money is the most important thing. I think you need to go in there as your first time, knowing how to find the answers to the questions that the attorneys will present to you and to the clients and the claimants that come in.
Pascal, what do you think you sort of learned after your first paralegal role?
Site checking in the blue book. If I had known all the years before, actually the role that I'm in now, how to site check and utilize the blue book, I think I would be sitting on a gold mine. At my role at Merrill Lynch, I've never seen the blue book. We never site check. I knew Westlaw. I went on to LexisNexis, but I never even knew what PACER was. Our outside counsel did all that. And when I came to DC, I moved with Bank of America Merrill Lynch. I worked at home, which was a heaven-sent job. Then they did a massive layoff. And I'm job hunting in DC, and I'm like, site checking blue book, Google. Oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. GW gave me every bit of my experience now. And at my firm now, if there's no one else to site check, if I'm not there, they'll wait until I come in the next day. I definitely have to say site checking and the Blue Book, which sometimes I refer to as the Blue Bible. If I had known about this years ago, I definitely would have taken that on or learned it before moving to DC, because it's a tool that I think no matter where you go, whatever field, as long as you know how to Blue Book and use the Blue Book and site check, it's outstanding.
Shahzi, what do you think? You came from a different governmental agency, but
Yeah.
stayed in your same sort of track and from a different vantage point. How was that transition, and what did you sort of learn?
I think what I wish someone would have told me starting out, in my experience, is for me to trust myself and have confidence, because I think, you know, when you transition from an agency such as a patent office, where my experience, you're not supporting a lot of attorneys, you know, that kind of thing. You're sort of working on your own case docket, and the expectation and the bar is sort of set by you and your supervisor, as opposed to a group and various different roles within that group. You know, stress level isn't quite the same. So I think, you know, someone told me just, you know, note to self, trust yourself and have confidence. It would really help with my ability to work under pressure, manage my stress, and, you know, feel confident in the decisions that I'm making when I'm under pressure to, you know, provide some sort of work product for an attorney.
Kate, what about you?
I would say, looking back, I mean, I think I'm happy with how my career has gone so far, but looking back, if I were to go and do over my first job and the whole job search process, I think I would maybe try more firms, you know, I mean, interview more, and really get an idea of what's out there, not sell myself short. I mean, I kind of was the first person who made me an offer. I just took the job, and I was happy to have done it, but it was a job I only stayed in for a year, which was probably perfect. But, you know, so it was a lot of training for a very small amount of money. But, you know, yeah, it was really, yeah, I gained so much that year, but ultimately from that low point, it's just hard to make the jump in salary you need. But the next job I got to where I needed to be. But I really think had I really looked out and not just not have the confidence you need to, you know, just kind of sell yourself and know that you can do, you know, a certain amount of things. You aren't, you know, you don't know everything, and they know that when you're just coming out of school. So that's kind of something we all have going for us at that point. But you know, they're willing to teach you at that time, but you know, just not too, you know, they don't want to have to be there every second. They want to give you information and you run with it. And so as long as you can do that, I think you're in good shape, and just, yeah, don't sell yourself short. So.
Can I add
Absolutely.
to that? At my time at Merrill Lynch, I just want to add that whenever an opportunity presents itself, if you feel comfortable and it's something you want to do, take it. I passed up 2 opportunities to be in a different department at Merrill Lynch. I loved my role. I loved the group that I worked with. And I'm like, I'm not leaving, I'm staying, but I passed up an opportunity in compliance. I passed up an opportunity in the corporate side of it. And when I was job hunting, I'm like, I'm seeing these compliance positions, this, you know, corporate secretary, and I'm like, if I had only, you know, so sometimes even though you love your role, you're comfortable, it's you have the longevity, sometimes it's good to, if the opportunity arises, I say go for it. That's one of the other things that I wish someone had told me at the time. If it comes up, if they're allowing it, take the chance. You know, it's okay to try something new. You know, this way you have the experience in different roles.
I think that's very important. I think, you know, people ask me all the time what I look for when I'm interviewing paralegal candidates. And it goes for whether we're hiring a project assistant, which is very, very entry level, or we're looking for a very specialized paralegal. And I always say that I'm looking for somebody who has intellectual curiosity, you know, who has the right drive, and who is teachable. Because again, you can come with different skills, you can come with different abilities, but I may want you to do something, you know, slightly different than the way that your last law firm wanted you to do it. if you're not willing to learn as a paralegal, your career is going to be very short because everything you do constantly changes. And I think that's one of the things with the programs at GW that I think, all the professors, we talk about that a lot when we're putting our curriculums together, is thinking about what we can do to really prepare people to go out and to be successful. And to have those skills that people are looking for, and to have a little bit of exposure to different types of things. You may come into a program or into a position thinking, I absolutely love litigation and I hate corporate. Well, you may never have done a corporate project or worked on a corporate deal. And litigation at your firm may be very slow, and you may have an opportunity to do corporate. The reality now is you should take that opportunity because it's important to be flexible and to be cross-trained, as in as many different areas as you can. Kate, you mentioned that you're studying for PACE, and I don't know if everybody is as familiar with PACE. Maybe you can just give us a 2-second overview of what that is and tell us why you think that that would be helpful for your career.
Sure. PACE is the Paralegal Advanced Competency Exam. I'm glad it was written down here. It's ultimately you study to take an exam, which would then, after you've passed that, make you a registered paralegal. And so you get to put RP after your name, I guess, with a little trademark. Basically what I've learned while I've been studying, I'm also in school, so everything is like so fresh. So it's like the perfect time to be studying for it and not wait till I've been out of school, because the PACE exam book, it's just a nice thick book with just all these different, what are they called, profiles? No, I can't remember. There's different sections that just cover such a diverse, just every field of law is in there. And so, and it really just highlights the really high points that you'll see in the exam. And it gives you kind of guidance for taking the exam, and lets you know the things they're going to be looking for, and everything's kind of federal level versus state because it's a national exam. And it's just, I don't know, right now I think it's busy work, but it's, I think it's all really going to help me take the exam, and that's the main thing there. And I think what it shows in the end, to be a registered paralegal, you just kind of have an overall ability to, maybe pick up and run with something. If somebody gives you something, you may not have all those skills already, but you'll know where to go. You'll know people to contact. You'll know, you just won't ever be stuck. And so I think that's the one of the things being a registered paralegal is going to do for you. I sometimes wonder, because I always thought, being a paralegal is cool enough, and it's so funny because my whole life, 22 years, whenever I say I'm a paralegal, people are like, oh, that's cool, and I'm going, why would you think that? It is, but, why would you think that? And, well, now I'm going to have an RP and be even cooler, so.
Alphabet soup is always important behind people's names. Just to add to what Kate said, if you go through an educational program like the one at GW or others that shall not be named here, you come out with a paralegal certificate, or you come out with a specific degree. There are 2 national paralegal associations here in the U.S. One is the National Association of Legal Assistants, NALA, and one is the National Federation of Paralegal Associations, which is NIFPA. There are a couple other minor ones, but those are the main players. And they both have certification programs that you can go through. They both have 2 tiers, entry level and advanced. So you have different requirements for those, but it's another way to distinguish yourself from the 150 other applicants that are applying for a position that you're applying for. Or if you're already a paralegal and you're interested in additional opportunities, it's a way to show your firm, your organization, yourself, that you're continuing to sort of invest back in your job as a career and a profession. Jazzy, I know that you have other, I'm sorry, we have a question. Yeah.
I have a question. With so many large law firms training just students with, well, I'm not saying students, but graduates who have the 4-year degree and training them to be a paralegal. How does that allow people who are coming out with the certificates, who are coming out with the Masters in Paralegal Studies, because firms are looking at costs as well, and they can hire someone and then train them as a paralegal versus paying you what you earn for what you have the experience and knowledge in. How should you combat that?
Okay. Does anyone want to address that specifically? I have a few thoughts which I'll add at the end from the manager point of view, but to throw it to the panel. How do you think about competing with people? I guess the question is people that sort of learn OJT, right, on the job and come up and are given a paralegal title or don't have specific paralegal education or a specific paralegal certificate. How do you sort of compete with them or compare with them in the marketplace?
Well, from my personal experience, I had on-the-job training. I could have sat and said, okay, that's as far as I want to go. But when you get a passion for the field, for the career, you want to go further. It's almost as though, I look at it this way, I don't want to go to a doctor's office that did not go all the way. Like a doctor, I don't want to know that he didn't go all the way. I don't want to know my attorney bought his, his degree on eBay. It's like you have it in you to go forward. Now comparing, I'm also getting ready to study for PACE. I won't say the full term, but I often wonder how would an employer look at my credentials? Is it too experienced? Is it too? I think for the most part it presents you in a way that this girl is all or nothing, or this gentleman is all or nothing, compared to someone that comes in maybe straight out of high school like I did. On the job, I can peek over someone's shoulder, I can have someone show me how to do it, but at the end of the day, do I really understand it? Do I grasp it? Can my attorney put me in charge when he's at court with the judge and the jury, leave me in a war room to gather the information? Some people take on faster, but your credential tells your boss, it tells you that you're well equipped to do the job. If there are firms that's not willing to pay because of the credentials, then you seek higher. That means you have higher to go. That's just my personal take on that.
Maria, you have a neat, unique background that you work in an area where you were active duty and now you're working sort of in government. How do you see that same sort of issue playing out in a government sector versus private practice with a paralegal's credentials, or how does the government sort of view that?
I think my success in the paralegal field has a lot to do with my education. Like I said, your on-the-job training limits you to what you've been trained and based on their knowledge and what you've comprehended. But if it wasn't for me pursuing the GW degree, it wouldn't have exposed me to the tools that I would need and the knowledge that I gained had I not taken that extra step to get into education. When employers, at least in the federal sector, see that you have a certificate, they say, okay, this person is not only interested, and apparently, for them to apply, they have to have the qualifications, but they're also certified, or they have a degree. So therefore, they're already knowledgeable. So you actually have a stronger weight having that educational background. Yes, of course, experience plays a role, but if you have both, or at least one or the other, your case is more compelling and is more persuasive. So I wouldn't necessarily look at an individual who only has an education, or think they know too much, or they're going to be too expensive. When the federal government, I know at least when I see my supervisors and they look at individuals like, ooh, this person has a GW degree, or ooh, you got a certificate from George Mason, or wherever you go, I always hear that ooh sound like they're educated. It kind of reduces the training time.
Yeah, and
have that tool, the tool.
And I think the government is one of the employers that gives specific steps and accreditation for certain certificates and education. And so that's why I wanted to make sure we got, Maria's perspective, because it's very different. And Shahrzad, you have additional education and background, and you're working in one of the top 3 highest paid paralegal areas in the city, right? So how do you think that your background scares anybody off, or plays to your advantage, or what do you think?
Sometimes it depends on the firm. It depends on the IP firm and what they are looking for in their paralegal hiring. I wanted to add something about the question that was asked, and I think this sort of it can be tied into the answer that I'm going to provide with the secondary question. I think having education specific to paralegal studies can really set you apart, like from a hiring perspective, as opposed to a student that has a 4-year degree but no specific paralegal education, in a sense that it shows that you're committed to paralegal field as opposed to staying at the firm for a year and going to law school. And I think that it shows that you're invested in that type of a path, and the firm will then invest in you in that way, as opposed to sort of seeing you as a temporary employee that'll stay and that you're here for a stepping stone to go on to law school. So I wanted to just say that. And then as far as my personal background, I have like I said, 2 degrees in chemistry. I think with IP in particular, having a technical background is very important as a paralegal, just as it would be with other type of roles in that firm, because you need to be, in some aspects as a paralegal, especially in biotech, familiar with scientific knowledge in some way. And I think having a master's and a bachelor's really helps with that. And as a paralegal, I think that it helps your growth within the firm also. So that's what I would say. But at times, I'll be honest, having a master's degree in chemistry isn't always something people are willing to invest in when they look at my resume, for example, if I were to be applying at a law firm, because they would think that I might be overqualified. So I think it really depends on the firm's needs, the type of education they're looking for, and what type of assistance they'll need. What type of assistance will the patent attorneys or patent agents need help with? Well, how much are they willing to give that paralegal responsibility for? So I think that sort of makes a difference.
Can I touch on that? I have my bachelor's degree in psychology, and my goal was to go to law school and become a divorce attorney. I was fascinated with it. So that's where the psychology degree came in, and then I thought about doing just basically family law. When I started my job hunt 2 years ago, when I first moved to DC, it bothered me. Like, here I am with only legal background. I've only worked at law firms with a psychology degree. And I went to an interview, and the lady's like, this doesn't add up. And I felt so incomplete, like there's no way. So I had to tell her, well, I'm starting GW, I'm getting my master's in paralegal studies, and the legal field is my dream. Then I got a phone call, and it was from the Children's Hospital. They loved the fact that I had a psychology degree, and they wanted me in their department. Unfortunately, I had to turn the job down. But, sometimes just like Shahrzad said, no one wants to look at your bachelor's degree and think they thought maybe I was overqualified or whatever, but it tied in. And then when I interviewed at Hollingsworth, they loved the fact that I had a psych degree. I knew how to do research. I knew how to read statistics, being that it's a product liability firm for a pharmaceutical company. So it tied in. Sometimes you might feel that little edge of, they're going to look at this and not like me. It depends on who that person, who's interviewing you. It might just click in their head like, okay, this person, I can hire this person. It means they're serious, they can do the work, it all ties in at the end of the day.
And I'd like to make a plug for a difference between a firm that hires paralegals and an organization that has a paralegal program, okay? Because I consider my firm a firm that has a paralegal program. We understand, and I've specifically set up jobs for those different roles that you were just talking about. So I have project assistants who are graduates of wonderful four-year educations, who don't have any paralegal background, who come in and they can only stay in my firm for 2 years before they actually have to go learn something and be a paralegal in advance, or they go off to whatever adventure they're going to go off, some law school, some running and kicking and screaming from the law firm world altogether. I have case assistants. The minimum entry requirement for being a case assistant is you have to have at least a four-year degree, a paralegal certificate, and no experience. That's the minimum requirement for a case assistant. For a paralegal, you have to have all of those plus at least 5 years. So if you look at the progression of how I've set up my program, no matter what type of applicant you are, right? Somebody who has, just come out of a four-year school and not really sure what they want to do, I have a role that I can incorporate you into. Those people don't compete with paralegals who have invested in their education and invested experience, and they're apples and oranges. So sometimes I need an apple and sometimes I need an orange, but I'm not interviewing very senior people for project assistant positions, and I'm not interviewing very junior people who haven't invested in their education specifically as a paralegal for my paralegal roles. Some programs aren't programs. They don't make a distinction, and they have one title, and they have everything from I graduated from a great school yesterday to I've spent 30 years in the paralegal profession, and they have the exact same title for all of those folks. You can distinguish not just by title but by responsibility, but I think within a law firm environment it's much, much more difficult to do that now. And so I think that's why when you're looking at where you're interested in being, I would encourage you to learn about the program or how they utilize paralegals, because I think you're going to find very different reactions to different types of resumes depending on how the programs are set up. So, other questions? Yes?
So I am a new paralegal. I have not been, I just graduated with a certificate in May, and I've been working in the legal field since I graduated from my undergrad, but I haven't sort of, or at least I don't want to have to decide some area of law yet, and I want to get a more well-rounded sort of experience before I decide that. But there is sort of a pressure when you look up jobs that say immigration paralegal or corporate paralegal. So just sort of speak to how did you become a corporate paralegal, or like what was the path to get to whatever expertise you like, because that's just sort of hopefully my next step to find something like that.
Well, Maria, Kate, why don't we let you start?
Okay.
And then we'll let...
Well, something that was surprising for me, I worked for a very large telecommunications company who did a lot of mergers in the late 90s. And so with the mergers, there was just a lot of opportunity to do things that you wouldn't normally do in your job. Like I worked in international regulatory and public policy. So that was, I mean, my regular standard job, which was already pretty cool. And, you know, I spent most of my time at the FCC or dealing with our folks in Brussels or all over the place. So, but then when you do a merger, all of a sudden you become the international employment law. You know, you start learning everything about that because all of a sudden you have to lay off a whole bunch of people internationally. And then you start merging with companies, or you get taken over by companies that end up committing fraud and going bankrupt. And so you learn all kinds of things about fraud, compliance, bankruptcy. So if you find a really bad company, that's a really good experience. Get in their legal department. You're going to learn all kinds of stuff. But no, it amazes me how much you learn when you end up doing things that are kind of unexpected. And so I started in real estate and ended up doing that I think 4 years. I just wanted to go up to DC well, I was in DC, then I went down to Woodbridge where I lived to work for 3 years. But it's just so small town. And so then I came back up here and just went with a mid-sized firm, but it was communications law. It was completely different than anything I'd done. I'm not even sure why they hired me. But ultimately they could see that with the experience I had before, you know, I could learn something new. So I did learn due diligence, and that firm was basically all about buying and selling radio or broadcast stations. So you do all this due diligence, and you really learn a lot about commercial sales. But when you're in a law firm, suddenly you you actually can learn things from the legal secretaries, and you can learn things from the other legal assistants, as well as all the attorneys. But yeah, there's just, you end up doing corporate, you end up doing, I think there was IP stuff. I actually had one attorney who, every time I went in his office, he had like another closing that just was like in a pile. And I'm going, what? You know, he'd have like 100 piles in his office. So I just said, can I just start putting those, organizing them? And you really don't want to do that as a paralegal. I mean, you don't want to become the person who organizes, but
Yeah, it'll drive your manager crazy.
well, well, you end up doing a lot of overtime because you really don't have time to do that during the day. But in doing that, you know, all of a sudden they're going, oh, she knows how to organize, and if you have a big project, go to her, and you know. And I really today would not consider myself a big project person, but yeah,
It just depends, I think, sometimes. Yeah. But, you know, I think as well, to get back to your question, I think sometimes the size of the organization is helpful. I don't know if the panelists have had this experience, but sometimes the larger the organization, the more specialized you become, because they have groups of just SEC people or just litigation or just corporate. I started out at a 6-attorney firm, so if there was a case that walked in the door, I got to work on it. And so sometimes when you're not sure what area you really want to be in, you know, sometimes you can try to work at a smaller place or for a smaller group within a larger organization that maybe has those different areas that you can, you know, practice in. After I did the general practice, you know, I did everything from, you know, criminal to traffic to veterans affairs to divorce and child custody and, again, wills and estates. And then I, you know, happened to follow an attorney that I had worked with at the general practice firm to an IP boutique firm, which is where I learned IP litigation, which became sort of my specialty then for many, many years. So I think sometimes if you get hired into a larger organization, they have a specific position that they're hiring for. And sometimes it's harder to get out of that group because they obviously had work to do. That's why they posted a position. Does anybody else have a comment, Maria?
I do. With the Department of the Army, where I first worked at, the JAG office was a mix. We had tort, military justice, contracts, labor law, family law, and MEB, where the soldiers were getting medical evaluations for. And being around with the different areas of law, because sometimes in tort you have an overlap. Oh, this might have to go through contract, have a contract attorney look it over, or the actions that occurred here may require the criminal justice because the military or service member is involved, or it might have been the labor law. And that allowed me, at least, the exposure to see exactly the specialized areas and how they operated, and told me clearly what I don't want anything to do with that field because I will not have a life. You know, it's like I have to balance certain things that are important to me and what I'm willing to give up. Or like hearing what another attorney from a different field had to say with regards to the issue that we were talking about, that kind of keyed into me. It's like, oh, that's interesting, you know, I didn't know that. And if you can find yourself, find the opportunity to be around a firm or an agency that has different fields already within it, that would be a good way to start, because I can't really tell you that tort's the best thing or contracts. A lot of people, my previous attorney said she does not want anything to do with contracts. She thinks it's the driest and most bland thing ever. But then I hear a judge and it's like, oh, tort, you're dealing with people's life and you have to gauge the value of their damages. I'd rather just deal with the concrete, okay, you owe me $5 million, I'm paying. You know, so it's a different viewpoint. And getting a mix and seeing how they overlap and how they deal with certain legal issues allows you to then kind of gravitate, then to make a quick decision, say, okay, I'm going to apply for IP, and then you find out, I hate this job.
Well,
you're stuck.
Yeah. And I think, again, one thing that I think paralegals make the mistake of is just because you worked in one particular field doesn't mean that you can't, you know, sort of reinvent yourself, right? And if you can find litigation is a good common thread. You know, litigation has basic skills, so you can do, you know, IP litigation, you can do tort litigation, you can utilize some of your common skills to maybe work into a different area and see if you know, enjoy that area more. Same with corporate and same with real estate, et cetera. So, switching just a little bit, let's talk about a day in the life. People always hear that paralegals are getting sleeping bags and cots, and you know, we don't get to leave ever our offices. And you know, what is a typical work day or work week like for you in terms of hours? And you know, is that typical within your specialty or your organization? Pascal, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. My classmates know my past classmates know my story. For me, I'm a single mom. I'm a trial paralegal, and that meant no sleep. And I went to school full time. So a day for me was take my son to school, get to work, work overtime, come to class, go back to work. If it's getting ready to go to trial, I work literally Monday to Sunday for, 2 months sometimes. Then when we get to trial, 20-hour work days, sometimes 24-hour work days. I mean, the overtime money is good, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the balance of trying to find rest, it's very, very difficult. But it also, you have to have a passion for what you do. I remember I was on the verge of breaking down. Christine, Fern, they were like my rocks. I would complain, I would cry, but I loved the job. I loved the investigative part of it. I love knowing that, you know, my attorney can say, oh, give it to Pascalle, she can site check and get it done within 20 minutes. Are you kidding me? A 50-page minute? No way. But, you know, it's a struggle. But again, if you have it in you that this is, the paralegal career is your passion, you tend to simmer down. But be prepared to work, and it depends on the field that you're in. I'm sure you guys probably don't have, there were times I got home at 1 a.m. You know, I'm in class and my son's like, I'm hungry, and it's like, okay, figure something, I have to figure something out, order dinner, you know, you have to find a balance. So, you know, it's tough being a trial litigation paralegal, but if you have that passion for it, you'll find a way to balance it out.
I wanted to know, as far as what Tara was trying to start with, it's like, what are your functions, your job functions for that day? I wanted to compare a paralegal in the private sector versus a paralegal in the government sector, because I'm a paralegal for the federal government, and I want to know the comparison of what your, like what your functions would be. Like, do you draft motions? Do you do this? What
okay, for me, I don't draft motions. I've done it in the personal injury field, the medical malpractice field. I've drafted those documents, but in the trial field that I'm in now, I've never drafted a motion. I site check them day in and out. So basically, when I get in the morning, I check my emails, and depending on, I prioritize everything. If it comes from the head honcho, that's definitely first. Everything is important. Nothing is oh, I can get to that tomorrow. I list how I'm going to work for the day. I usually do, if I get a 20 to 50 page brief, I side check, make sure I get my exhibits together, then I'll do my blue book. I'll pull the exhibits, then do my side check. Because when I get into Westlaw, I want to be in Westlaw. I'm not going in and out and, you know, doing a shuffle with that document. So it's all about prioritizing. While I'm working on that 50-page brief, I get another attorney sending me another brief to side check. Oh, this has to be filed tonight, and I'm looking at the time, it's 5:30. Oh, wow. You get down to it. You start working on that document that's not going to be filed for another week in advance, but it's 50 pages. Be prepared to come in on the weekend. So, I mean,
that goes back to the schedule you were talking about, which is sort of a typical day for a litigation paralegal is not typical. I think that's sort of, you know, when I was doing litigation, people used to ask me what a typical day was, and I'd say, well, I always write my to-do list before I leave the night before, and at 9:30 I take it, ball it up, put it in the trash, and I try to figure out what my day's actually going to look like, right? So, you know, litigation tends to be more unpredictable. But Kate, what about corporate?
I come in and I have a pretty 40-hour-a-week schedule now that I'm in school because I just can't not have that. But so when I come in, I do agreements. That's my job. And so I will draft some agreements. I have I think 435 open agreements right now that I'm working on. So at any given time, any of those could have comments come back, or they're ready to be circulated for signature, or they've just been signed and I have to abstract the document and get that in our database. Or I do the abstract and then give it to our other paralegal who does all the database entry. But so I thankfully have, our contracts have really grown over the last couple of years, so I have a paralegal who helps me with everything. He's fresh out of school, or a couple of years now, yeah, having the master's or the certificate is an awesome asset. He stays very busy also, so, but we both contribute and we both back each other up when we're not available. We also, at my company, do have the opportunity to do pro bono work. So we do wills clinics and we do domestic violence attorney of the month every month. Not all of us do it every month, but I sign up a couple times a year for the domestic violence clinic, and then I do the wills clinic as often as I can. And we do those at least quarterly. And so, except for the month that I do the attorney of the day domestic violence, I really stay to the 40 hours. But it turns out that when you're working those cases and you're out of the office with the clients and just doing something outside your job, you really do need to make up that time. So that's time I'm always willing to make up, because I mean the company's so generous and they actually pay me overtime if I have to do that, which I think is ridiculous, but great. But it's, I mean, you know, because they're committed to doing the pro bono for, you know, to give our time to help the community. So, and just a note on pro bono also, that's a great opportunity to learn other things. And the most rewarding thing I do is the pro bono work. And I mean, even though, you know, I have plenty of grateful clients and attorneys, and I really do love my job, the wills clinics, these people give you hugs afterward. You know, the domestic violence, it's a rocky road, and you never know how it's going to turn out, and it's usually very disappointing, but you feel like you have a goal to do something good. So, you know, so that's that.
Shahrzad, you're in a large IP boutique,
Yes.
right? So what's a normal work week or work day? And
Well, for me, a normal work week is a little less than 40 hours a week, which sounds really nice, but sometimes depending on, you know, our firm, we go through ebbs and flows of a lot of work and not a lot of work. You know, like towards the end of the billable year, it kind of tends to stack up. You know, when people are on vacation or our clients are on vacation, we might have less work. Like Thanksgiving, Christmas time, it'll slow down. And sometimes in the summer, we'll have a IP litigation case where it's almost like all hands on deck. So it sort of goes, you know, up and down, but on average I'd say that it's a typical week. You won't likely, if you're on the prosecution side of things where I am, you won't likely be working overtime every week or every day. That's not to say that the day that when you are there, it's not stressful, because you know, our paralegals work in teams, and they support different groups of attorneys, and we all support each other as paralegals in addition to that. So there's a lot of overlap with who we work with, and depending on, you know, if there are rush assignments that come through, we need to, you know, staff those and stuff like that. So it can really snowball sometimes, and part of my role as a senior paralegal, I have to manage that workload and make sure everybody's plate is a little even, so no one's overwhelmed, and that can be challenging sometimes depending on how that week's going, what kind of projects we have going on. But as an IP paralegal, it is definitely a specialized field, and the types of things that we do as paralegals are prepare all the different types of items or filings that accompany a patent application. That's on the prosecution side. And we work with the PTO almost exclusively on that kind of stuff. And that's where the technical background, specifically for biotech, really helps. There are other types of technologies that our firm has clients in. There's the electronics group, there's mechanical engineering type things. So, and the stringency on the technical background for that as a paralegal isn't quite as so with the biotech. I think possibly because the biotech paralegal just needs to be familiar with that like science verbiage that I mentioned previously. But we also sometimes help out our litigation practice, and those are times that can be very stressful, because once we're pulled in, we know that the project really needs a lot more staffing, just because they're overwhelmed or they have a lot of cases. So I think it's a good opportunity for any time there's a project or there's another department that needs help and they ask for it. It's always good to step up and help, and that's where your time as a paralegal will sort of exceed that 40-hour work week. But it's also an opportunity for you to get experience under your belt. Like, you know, I've worked on an IP litigation case, or I held an ITC case or something like that. So it expands your knowledge base and helps you get a variety of work. So.
Yeah, and Jazzy speaking IP for those of you that don't know.
Sorry.
That's okay. An ITC case is an International Trade Commission Section 337 action.
Yeah.
And if you specialize in intellectual property, that's not a litigation that's filed with the U.S. courts. That's an administrative agency proceeding to block products that are being imported into the United States. So that takes a whole nother skill set. You're not dealing with the court, you're dealing with an agency. There's a different set of administrative law rules. And ITC specialists are highly compensated because those cases tend to go from beginning to end much, much quicker, about a third of the time, as a normal IP litigation case does. So you do spend nights and weekends for ITC matters because they just go so quickly, and you don't have 24 months to do the litigation. So some little IP speak, right?
Yeah.
So. All right, Maria, what about working for the government? What's a typical day or work week like?
Well, it's typically 40 hours, but that's where your ability to manage your time and multitask plays an important role. But there are times where you will work overtime, but you will be compensated for it. The difference for me with litigation versus appeals, litigation, the attorney, they're high-wired. They're just, hurry up, find this, you'll draft this. And I actually had the attorney say to me, Maria, Bill, guess what? I want you to find a case. And you mark, you say, go. And that's like, then you need to know IRAC. IRAC, act. So the more cases you find, you need to be able to define and write an IRAC method. And that's in litigation. And this constantly, hurry up, respond, respond, and then you're presenting. So you're actually writing, even though the attorney is the one presenting the product, you're writing your analysis as it relates to that matter. Now go into the appeals process. Now you're hearing the litigator, the litigants come and complain to you. And they'll say, well, and you pick up the phone. And it's a pro se versus the appellant, the government is like, well, I want to post this person and I want to force this person to go all the way. And then it's your job to say, hold on, wait, here are the board rules. These are what you're required to do. If you want to subpoena, then you can subpoena. And then in the appeals process, because there are people that are pro se, individuals that are pro se, you have to be very careful with what you say, that you are not providing legal advice, that you are providing the rules and guidance and instructing them where to go. And if they do not understand the theories, then perhaps they should hire an attorney to represent them, right? So you have to be careful. And in the litigation, it's a constant need to prepare, and if perfectionism is your best friend, it can also become your enemy, because you have to be on point. You have to ensure everything you have for your attorney is there and prepared, perfect, and ready for litigation. In the appeals process, because you're working with judges, we're looking at the motions, and the judges, depending on how comfortable they feel with you and your experience, I would get the letter and the judge puts granted. So basically I have to draft it, and then they review it, and then they will sign it. Or sometimes if you're new and you have little experience, the judge will actually draft the order, and then you will of course then transcribe it. And in the appeals process, you deal with the hearings and listen to what the judge's specifications are when it comes to certain hearings and what their expectations are. So it's different, but I think based on how they have their days, I think my days are calmer. And I'm a little bit more relaxed. So I get a little bit of drama. You'll hear parties argue and say, oh, that's partly, I requested and for discovery, and they're giving me a bunch of paper with it. It's not even redacted and blah, 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 whatever the case is. And you have to be tactful, and you have to know how to answer without getting caught up in the middle, and know that your role and what the judge's role is, and how you get the parties moving and talking and working together to resolve the issue. And so your roles shift when you're from the litigation to the appellant side. And I have to say, either way, you'll get a good mix of drama.
I'll give you the behind the magic curtain for Manager's Day. If any of you are paralegals and thinking about you want to be a section lead or a team lead or be responsible for other folks, I work about 80-85 hours a week because I have offices in every time zone in the U.S. They open, my first paralegal on the East Coast gets into work at 6:30 in the morning. My last paralegal on the West Coast works until 7 o'clock Pacific time, which is 10 o'clock here. And I have about 600 attorneys who can reach out and show love and affection to me at any moment on an electronic leash or a BlackBerry. You know, that's part of my job, is to keep day-to-day stuff running. I have 5 coordinators who I work with, and they do a lot of the day-to-day stuff. But when something bubbles up on one of our 20,000 matters that we're currently handling, then it gets to me. In addition to doing all the hiring, all the staffing, all the performance management, all the training, all of the working with other departments and department chairs and monitoring all of the financials, utilization and reporting functions for the department. So.
When do you sleep?
So you know, I think, you know, all of us have gone through different phases in our career, and I think that's something else we should point out. You know, when I started at my 6-attorney firm, I was a single parent too, so it was much more important to me at that time to have a regimented schedule, and I set up my job so that I could do that. You know, as my personal life changed and I had more flexibility, I took different positions where I traveled more, or I went to, you know, 4 to 6 to 8 week trials away from home when I was doing IP Lit. And I have a 17-year-old now who has a credit card, keys, and a vehicle. And so when I have to travel now, she's a little bit more forgiving. And my husband is wonderful and stable and provides the other side of the balance of our life. So I think at different parts in your career, you look for different things, just like you do with any career. And I think when you're looking for a job, or you're considering taking on new responsibilities, or you're looking at sort of how you want to put your career together, it's important to keep those things in mind, because certain types of organizations do require more hours. Certain types of law are going to be less predictable than others. And then you always have the Z factor, which are the people you work with. So you can work in a very predictable area of law with a very unpredictable person. Or you can work in a very unpredictable area of law with a person who's a real planner, and who gives you a little bit more stability in your day-to-day life. So what other questions do we have? It's about 7:20, we have about 10 more minutes in terms of our official program. We'll go to the lightning round. Just feel free to throw out any question that you always wanted to know but were afraid to ask. No question is off limits. Rachel.
What do you do with the stress of being a paralegal?
Okay. How do you deal with the stress of being a paralegal?
Happy hour.
Happy hour? Okay.
White wine, but
Wine, chocolate. Okay.
I
A
think,
community, right? Have a community of peers. That's a good
oh
way.
yeah. For me, being that I am a single mom, I have to really have a schedule that affords me work time and mommy time. My son is 16. Credit card, keys, no car. He smuggled my spare keys a couple of times, but I travel. I have to, like, I went away for a month. Early in February, I went away for 3 weeks this past September. And I was supposed to go in July, and it drives me insane. Like, it's just him and I here. My family's in New York. My mom had to take time off to come stay with him. Being a trial litigation paralegal at this phase in my life, it's not the best thing, but I manage it. When my son goes away to college, I'll be happy to be at my job Monday to Sunday. I don't date, so yeah. Paralegal, it's my world, it's my life. But you know, you just have to find that balance. I write, I volunteer in an HIV organization. You know, like I was speaking with Kate earlier, sometimes I just have to get into something that takes me away from the paralegal world. You know, and if you can't find 20 minutes for yourself, which I do, I go to the bathroom a lot just to woosah, because sometimes your attorney will get you riled up, and you have to remember it's nothing personal, it's a job. You know, find that 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 20 minutes in a day. And it's really, sometimes it's all it takes, but at the end of the night, find a girlfriend, argue, stress them out like I have, but it just depends on how
it's that full circle moment back to
Yeah.
wine and happy hour
Yes.
and chocolate and running and, you know, but I think what, you know, Christine said is really important too. I think, you know, part of it is knowing that you're not alone, and in being able to see the bigger picture, and you know, I think that it is important to have both friends that are in the industry and friends that are not, or, you know, activities and interests that are, you know, in and then not, so that you can sort of get away when you need to get away. We actually monitor at McKenna paralegals paid time off, and they think we do it because they think that we think they're taking too much time. But the reality is we send just as many emails saying, you haven't taken a single day off in the last 90 days, when do you have something planned? As we do, hey, you know, we've noticed that you're taking lots of time off. And the reason we do that, quite honestly, is because you can very easily get caught up in these big deals, these big projects that go on for months, and you need to, you know, decompress and find the thing that makes you happy when you do it. So, yes.
Is there anyone work in an organization where there's like paralegal pools, like certain paralegals would probably do like do discovery, another pool might do motions, another pool might do.
Yeah,
They all do the same, all do all different.
You know, like my firm,
within
when you're
litigation.
assigned a case, you work with that attorney, you site check, you work it up. It's not like you get one phase of it and then it goes on to another team. It's your case, and you go to trial and come home, and that's how it works.
Shahrzad, you want to talk about within IP, maybe support units?
Yeah.
Maybe that's,
Well, the way our firm is structured is we have our paralegal pools as far as practice group, and that practice group is defined on what type of technology they work with. And that's not to say, though, sometimes we cross over depending on where, someone with bandwidth is available and you just need more hands on the project, or someone can't stay late but they need to file something late. So we'll have support that way. But the nature of the work essentially is the same. It's just what you're actually working with when it comes to the type of patent you're filing or patent you're litigating, or subject matter rather. Yeah, and the way that those pools or departments or practice groups are managed are kind of essentially the same. So that's why we were able to have that sort of crossover and major support network cross group that way.
yeah. And the reason I point out IP is because in some IP groups, Sterne doesn't do this, but other boutiques that are really large do. You can have a trademark support unit, and so the trademark application goes into the support unit, and then the team lead assigns it once it's sort of within the unit. Foreign filing sometimes works that way at some of the IP places. Just files where the actual law firm is not drafting the application, but it's been a foreign patent application that's coming into the U.S., so it goes through a different process. So IP sometimes has groups, but once you get to a senior level, generally you're not in the group, you're directing the group, or you're in a specialty. So, Cindy, you?
Yeah, I wanted to add on, in my particular instance, I have one particular client that I have all class action suits with, and in that instance, pretty much we do have a discovery team that's just charged of literally, like, the document production and uploading it to Relativity to make sure that we can all start doing what we gotta do. So I think it depends on the group that you're in, and if that group happens to have class action suits, where there could just be a team of paralegals that deal just with discovery and they do nothing else. So again, it depends on the organization that you're with.
Yeah, and if I worked on a matter where we actually represented the exiled government of Kuwait back in the day, in the 90s. So we had task groups where, one group worked on sort of, infrastructure and commerce stuff, and another group sort of worked on X-Page or immigration stuff, and we sort of broke it up by subject areas, but we were all sort of working for the same client, if you will, which happens sometimes on class actions or multi-district litigations, MDLs. So, other questions? Okay. One question that I get asked a lot, and I'll throw it to the panel, is the dreaded billable hour versus not being responsible for billing, and how much do you love legal billing or not? If you're in an organization that doesn't do legal billing, did you specifically sort of seek out that organization so that you don't have to do that? Pascal, you're billing.
I think I still owe you a DTE assignment, as a matter of fact. But I personally hate it. You have to. It's your client wants you to. But for me, it's like I'm so busy during the day. You're supposed to enter your time at the end of the day, but sometimes my day will not end until 11:59 p.m. I just want to go home. Actually, on Friday, I spent a good probably 3-4 hours of my workday entering my time because it had to be in. And when the owner of your firm is sending out an email that's threatening your life, get your time in.
It's
you have no
important to
choice,
make sure
but then you still have the site checking to do. And it's for me, DTE. It's stressful. I hate it. I'm sorry, Tara. I hate it, but I have to do it. So.
Okay, what about corporate? Do you have to do? You don't do legal billing in the strictest tradition, but you probably track your time, right?
We track time. believe it goes back to the client. When I was in law firms, I tracked my time. And then when I went to corporate at Verizon, I did not have to at all. There was nothing. And then when I came to Exxon Mobil, it went back to you're tracking your time. I mean, you're reporting what time you're putting into a client, but not what you're doing. And so it really is just a matter of, I think it's more for a head count and more to be sure that, you know, if they see a need for further resource, they'll see that. So.
Shahrzad, you're in private law firm land, so you're billing.
There's pretty much no way out of that. But I think that, you know, it's just part of the job. It's something that you have to get used to, and because it's so ingrained in the type of firm that I'm at, it's no one really will complain about it, except for when it gets to be, you know, you're behind in entering your time because you've just been so busy. That's when it's annoying, but it's really essential, and I can understand, you know, why we would need to do that. But also, what I think is interesting is that sometimes you can go back and look and see all the things you accomplished by looking at your billable hours and be like, wow, I really have worked a lot on these things, and I'm proud of myself. You know, like I really know this client really well, or you know, we have established a great working relationship, and you know, it's something you can, you know, if you're kind of geeky in the way that I am and like to go back and remind yourself of the accomplishments that you've made, that's one way to do it, you know, because it's all there.
You just pacified that whole thing for me. I look at it differently.
And Maria, in government, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you don't have to worry about that.
Well, to a point. Litigation, we track how much time we spent on each case, how much time we spent on the phone with an individual, but that's to determine whether the unit needs more resources.
It's for staffing purposes.
Yes, and because of the habit of having to mark down everything, I spent 3 minutes with this person, I did 30 minutes on this, on even email, how much time you spent on email. It just transferred over into the appeals. But the benefit of that is anytime a case goes through or an order was granted or denied, because I had that habit of tracking, I always could reference back. It happened 3 weeks ago, and this was the identification number that trails you back to that order that was granted. And so, no, it's not billable, but it's a good habit to have, and if you have it now, it's a good way to save your butt too.
All right, the last question that I want to throw out is one that was sort of broached by a person who participates in the online program. They participate in the program, they're actually starting to interview now, but they don't live where they're interested in working. So they have the issue of trying to learn about a legal community and find a job remotely, and then the whole interviewing. And I don't know if any of you have had that situation where you've moved maybe to DC and needed to interview, or you were interviewing outside of the area. But I can just address that question in general. There are a lot of, one of the reasons why managers are hesitant to look at candidates from outside of a particular area is sometimes we don't always understand the motivation for that person moving to the area. If the only motivation is a job, sometimes people find that they haven't done any research on the city. They relocate, and a year later they discover that they're homesick, or situations have changed, etc. And so people that move in sometimes tend to have higher turnover than people who are local that you hire and who already know the area or the legal community, etc. Also, if you're interviewing someplace that you don't live, it creates logistical issues, and some firms or organizations just say quite honestly that we don't have a shortage of knowledgeable or experienced candidates in our immediate area. We're more familiar with the schools or the programs or the other organizations where local candidates may have worked. So it may be a little bit more of an education process. Certainly, going to a program, using the online program for GW. People in the Washington metro area are very familiar with GW, and that gives them sort of a sense or tie-in of understanding the program. And you can certainly work with logistics. I do video conferencing interviews every day. I Skype now with potential interviewees. And maybe I do that because I have so many offices and I spend a lot of time on planes and I want to save myself some time. But I find that we, get really great candidates from outside of the area. And if we've done a lot of recruiting in a particular city, I'll specifically work with recruiters or people from outside the area to see if I'm, can take advantage of some candidates that are moving into the area. So it may be a little bit more difficult, but don't get discouraged. Melissa?
It also may depend on the city.
Yeah.
I'm from Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts. I went to undergrad in Massachusetts. I went to NYU Law School and took the Massachusetts bar and applied to Massachusetts firms. And they all said, well, why did you leave Boston? Mm-hmm. And I had every tie you could imagine to Boston except for 3 years of my life, and I still had to justify why I wanted a job in Boston. So Boston is one of those cities where, man, if you've ever left it, you're going to have to figure out a way to convince them you want to be back there. Some cities aren't like that, but if you do some due diligence ahead of time and figure out kind of the dynamics of the city, anybody in Boston will tell you.
That might be a Yankees Red Stuff. Boston, New York, there's a whole, issue.
Yeah. Actually, very similar story. I have a colleague who grew up in Jersey, went to college in Jersey, literally spent her entire life there, took the Jersey bar, and then applied for jobs there. And people ask why she left because now she's working in D.C. So it's almost like they're offended that you leave, and they ask why and what what changed your mind. Why do you want to come back now?
And New Jersey is actually that's what really tough one because then everybody they think that you don't think you can get a job in New York, so you're applying in New Jersey, and they don't like that. So some cities you have to have a good story for.
I got that a lot. When I left New York, I worked Maryland. Bank of America allowed me to work from home. So my address was still 4 World Financial Center, but I had Rockville, which was my pickup location for my mail, but I worked from home. And when I started job hunting, I got a lot of, you worked in New York, but you live in Germantown. Well, I technically worked in my living room, pretty much. But I got a lot of, why did you leave New York? Why did you, what's here that you want? And for me, my honest answer was a better life for my son. He was getting ready to start high school. I made the move. That was it. Sometimes you have to be honest, but not too honest. But, I did get questioned a lot as to why I left New York. Technically, I did and I did not. But once I got my foot into D.C., I can imagine that if I'm trying to find a job somewhere else, knock on wood, it's not going to be Virginia. It's not going to be, it will have to be in the remote area, just to avoid the questioning.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up our formal portion. I want to just take a moment and thank the panelists for devoting their time. I also want to encourage you, we're going to end the formal part of the program, but if the panelists are game, I'm certainly willing to stay after and answer any individual questions that you have. I want to thank the Student Association and the Alumni Association and the Career Center for sponsoring tonight's program and putting together, and for all the digs. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for coming.